everyone. My name is Satyam Vyas. I'm the founder and CEO of Climate Asia. Climate Asia is a not-for-profit dedicated to strengthening the climate ecosystem in Asia through capacity building of organizations focusing on human resource, organizational development, and thought leadership. As you all already know, climate change will cause a massive shift in the fundamental functioning of several industries around the world. Climate Asia is a new initiative to bridge the gap by working with direct and indirect climate actors and organizations across the spectrum in various sectors. We want to accomplish this by building a movement to inspire people to work in the climate ecosystem, a digital platform to find climate jobs, climate funding, events and news and thought leadership in the forms of convening conferences, panel discussions, and dialogue building. Climate Asia endeavors to create conversations around three pillars: share, empower, and connect, by increasing awareness, upskilling the ecosystem, and catalyzing networking amongst players within and outside the industry. We have launched this Conversation of Change series, a video interview centered around one of the most pertinent crises of our time, climate change. Conversations of Change attempts to synthesize perspectives around climate action, skills, talent, and journey of various climate leaders and their role in the climate ecosystem. I'm super honored to have Cecile Pompei from Sistema.bio with us today as our guest speaker for the Conversations of Change. Hi, Cecile. We are glad to have you with us.
Hi, lovely to be there as well. I'm super excited.
So just a bit of a background about Cecile. Cecile has spent 15 years in emerging markets with an overarching mission to empower people. She's currently in Mexico working for Sistema.bio as a chief of staff / chief people officer and discovering a passion for the area of people. Her specialities include people operations, culture at work, education, training, learning, coaching, mentoring, social and environmental enterprises, design of sustainable micro-franchising models and their support programs like training, coaching, mentoring, and support for necessity-driven entrepreneurs. She has also designed and led the transformational curriculum in the future of work. We are super honored to have Cecile with us. I'm so excited to talk to Cecile today, so I would jump right at it with our question, Cecile, if you don't mind.
No, please go ahead.
So Cecile, of all the major emitting sectors, agriculture, forestry, and other land use is currently the only one with very serious potential to become a net emission sink, meaning it can pull more greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere than it emits. How is Sistema.bio working towards reducing these emissions throughout the world? And if you can describe your role as a chief of staff.
It's two very big questions. So I think it's very important to understand. So actually agriculture and food production make up for about a quarter of all greenhouse gas emissions. So it is really an important piece. And there's different ways, there's different reasons for this. Like one of it is like all the animal waste is actually producing methanes when it's left there or in piles. It could be as well fertilizer. It is as well like when people burn wood, fuel, charcoal, etc. So it's actually a very polluting sector. Sistema.bio actually focuses on smallholder farms because it's where we believe there's a big need for us to address. Like they produce 70 to 80% food in the world. So we feel there's really a big need and they have probably less support. And so how do we actually work to reduce these emissions? So focusing on smallholder farmers, there's different ways. Like the first thing is that Sistema.bio receives the fresh organic waste, fresh manure from small farms before the methane can be emitted. So that's one thing, So which is different because I'm saying this because I have lots of people ask me, well, farmers already do it. They put piles of organic waste, animal waste, and they left it there. So we actually take it before and we make sure the methane is not emitted from there. Then, of course, inside the reactor, the biodigester, methane is produced, but in a controlled environment. And then whatever is coming out, like the biogas that comes out, is destroyed through complete combustion. So what happens is what comes out is actually less gas and it's CO2. It's not methane anymore. And CO2 actually pollutes much less. So that's kind of like the biggest thing to understand. And of course, we produce as well biofertilizer, and biofertilizer, of course, like is a very big difference in terms of like greenhouse gas emission. So this is kind of like giving a big picture on how we work on reducing carbon emissions. Now, my role specifically, I'm actually transitioning slowly to Chief People Officer full-time. A Chief of Staff is really it started a lot in the US. It's like really like a right arm of the CEO and an amplifier. So I always called myself like a super implementer. So it was a way to kind of take the strategy and make sure it's implemented. But as well, Chief of Staff is generally a temporary role, or it could be temporary when you have a specific need. And so at the time, we had a very big need in HR, and I started to get there. So HR people operation. And I discovered I absolutely love it, stayed there. And now I'm full on kind of our global Chief People Officer, which I'll become full time.
That's so exciting. Super happy to hear that. And Cecile, with that, you have around 15 years of experience in emerging market. You have lived around the world with an overarching mission to empower people. How would you describe your journey in this space, and what were the key learnings in the last 15 years?
Yeah, so it's hard to summarize, but I think there was two things for me, and that's important because I think one of my top key learning and advice is like to find out what makes you tick. And so there was two things for me. There was empowering people, which was quite important, but there was as well climate change. I've always worked in like social environmental change, and that was quite important for me. And then it took many forms, no? Like I worked in solar energy. I was just telling Satyam that I worked in Delhi for 5 years. Actually, I worked in India. In Africa, I was more working in micro-franchising in South Africa, Kenya. And then now in Mexico and a bit in London, I'm like back into different ways of like renewable energy and agroecology. So kind of finding your overarching mission is quite important. And then the declination of what it can be different. So actually, I had a big life before HR. I didn't do HR for for all my life. Before this, I was doing, actually, I started in business development, sales, project management, and no one knows this. And now I'm like in HR, and I think it's fantastic. And it's the same thing. It's like schmoozing customer in, which is recruitment, empowering people, making sure you create super strong processes. And that's the same really what I was doing before, is just another area. So find what makes you tick, and then, don't be stuck on what it could be. Let life show you different way and different jobs. And I think that's really important. So that's my biggest thing. Another, I have a few other advice as well. I think building a network is important. It is important to meet people in the space. Because there's so many things happening all the time. So it's quite exciting to see new jobs or new companies coming up, etc. The climate change sector is very exciting right now, and there's a lot of things you can see. So building networks, knowing people, being genuinely interested obviously makes it work, but that could be a second one. And then my third one, which I kind of said in the first point, is never limit yourself. It's something I say all the time. Don't be, like I said, too stuck on a job. I would have never gone into HR if I was like, no, I can do only this. And many times I see people coming to me and say, I was an investment banker. You don't understand. There's nothing I can do from there. I'm like, it's not true. I mean, you understand figures, you understand this, you're probably very good at client relationship. Like, you can transfer these skills. So don't be too stuck. Just know what you like, build some skills, build a network, and be open to translating this into a job that could be different ultimately. I think that's super important. These are my key learnings.
I think one line that resonated with me is like, life happens and the job will happen, and you can't necessarily control for it. If you start controlling for it, it might not lead to you realizing your complete potential, right? Because we
absolutely
all have limitations in our own brain and thinking when it comes to our own potential. So it's very, very fabulous to hear that, Cecile. And Cecile, with your, when it comes to your expertise in terms of sustainable micro-franchising model and people operations, you did talk about, the key things around HR is retaining and attracting talent. So what do you think are the essential skill sets required to work in this area?
It's not the essential. It's one of the things in HR. Very important is attract and retain talent. It's one of the pillar. It's interesting because I mean, I wish everyone understood we all have to work in climate change by now, but it's not happening just yet. So one of the struggle, of course, is to compete with like the tech market to other markets. And I'm saying this because it's interesting, because I find like the dichotomy between it's a sector after all, and it doesn't matter where you come from, and just being able to translate these skills is enough. But some companies are still resistant to this and saying, yeah, but you haven't worked in this space before. And sometimes it is important to, I mean, it is definitely important, for example, for me to understand emerging markets. So sometimes it is important. So I think essentially what you need to have is understanding where you're getting into. So for me, it was like understanding more about agriculture, but I have a lot of knowledge from India, Africa, a part of Latin America. So build something that you can use for sure and show what you can use. That's an essential skill. And then the second thing as well that is quite important is like climate change or social entrepreneurship is not a funny sector. It is a real sector. So you actually need to have essential skills. And people ask me, I want to work in this space. I'm like, what can you do? Can you work in finance? Can you work in marketing and sales? I mean, the sector is different and you need to understand the sector, but you need as well to have real skills, right? So don't tell me I just want to work in social entrepreneurship. Tell me right now I have experience in HR and social entrepreneurship, and that makes it true. So make sure you build some skills at any point in your career to get there. And then an essential thing I think as well is passion. It's something I'm so happy we have a lot of at Sistema.bio, but passion for what you're going to do. Like, it's not easy. There's a lot to do, but with passion, you understand there is so much to do. And I think it's amazing to be at this moment in time where you can really participate into something that makes sense. So I definitely think like passion and commitment is super important.
I love the fact that how you said we really have an opportunity to do something which makes sense and is probably required to save this planet. And I guess it needs to be combined with both logical reasoning and a sense of urgency. So glad
Absolutely.
you touched upon that. Yeah. Great, Cecile. So, I mean, we know that around the world, as employees and consumers become increasingly concerned with the social and governance issues, social entrepreneurship is bound to play a prominent role in driving future economic growth.
Yeah.
Now, what advice would you like to give to someone, to a senior or mid-level professional transitioning into this space, or to a student who wants to work in social entrepreneurship? If you look at these two audiences.
Yeah, levels. I get this question all the time. So I'll start with student, because I think student, well, I get it asked even more. And so my biggest answer is a normal sector answer, like find a boss that invests in you and build your skills. And I think sadly, and I'm saying it strongly, because in 2022, so many people are fighting for salary. They've heard of a friend of a friend of a cousin of I don't know what, that they could earn so much. And I'm like, sometimes I call them and I'm like, you don't understand. What you really want is build your skills, build your career, have someone that promotes and pushes you. So I think for me, for students in any kind of career, find a boss that invests in you, someone amazing, and find someone that could grow your skills and teach you, coach you into stuff. So that's my answer always and forever. And I absolutely mean it. For a mid-level or more senior level, when I recruit, it's actually exciting to have people that come from other sectors, because sometimes if you come from consulting or FMCGs, you could have like really, you've received a lot of training. So that's quite cool. But what we see they're missing is definitely a bit of experience and understanding, what I was saying before. So kind of either understanding the markets you want to work in. Like for me, I have people applying and they've worked in the US and in Holland. And I'm like, I mean, like Africa, Asia, Latin America. So, and it is different. Only one of these continents is enough, to be different. So maybe getting a bit of experience or understanding the market you want to work in. If you haven't worked in, let's say, agri before, try to find ways to consulting, to read, to get informed, to work, find a way to get involved, basically. And that goes as well to like build a network. So building a network is important as well, because you speak to people that do the job, you do understand what's going on, you do understand the different kind of jobs. When you change sector, it is important to understand what the different jobs are and what they mean in the space. And finally, coming back to my first advice is kind of like, find what makes you tick. I think lots of people, senior, medium level, they don't, I mean, depends. I see some that really know and they're like, I'm an amazing commercial, I can be there in another sector, and I think that's great. But some of them are like, I just want to get involved anywhere. And that doesn't really help an HR person or any kind of director to be like, okay, help me understand a bit more. So find what really you're more excited or passionate about in the best case, and go after this, you know, build a network around this, understand what different jobs, understand what you could do, understand how your skills transfer to this, etc., etc. So that's kind of my basic advices.
That makes a lot of sense. The key points for me is build your network, work with a boss that invests in you, don't restrict or limit yourself, be open-minded, network, learn from others, pretty much being open-minded and
Others, yeah.
both goes hand in hand. Cecile, you have lived around the world, I would say, Asia, East and South Africa, Europe, and now in Mexico. And you have kept a philosophy of living close to your heart. You have talked about it again and again. You cannot limit yourself or realizing your full potential. And your own learning support, you know, how you support people towards aligning their work with themselves, mixing purpose and impact, working with women worldwide. What are some of the philosophies that you have learned over the years from them or from living around the world?
So many. By country, I could speak forever. What I've learned in India, what I've learned in Kenya, and what I think, I like what you said. You talked, and in your question you asked about women. I think one of the big things for me is, and one of my biggest learning is, like, first of all, I think women are incredible human beings, but women in emerging markets just blow my mind every time. They inspire me so much. I just can see this picture of, like, I don't know, in a bus of an African woman carrying her bag of fruit on her head, having 4 children on her, and she has her head up high, and she doesn't complain, and she just, like, probably handling the finance of the family, having 3 jobs, and not complaining, and being this super resilient and strong human being. So I think if you worked with this level of women, you understand what a powerhouse is, you know, or could be. So I think that kind of inspires me always. And my mom actually always tells me, you're stronger than what you think. And I think that's kind of represented when I see these women for me, like, you are stronger than what you think. So don't limit yourself. I'll say it again and again, don't limit yourself, and you can do whatever you set up your mind to do. And if I had listened to people at the beginning of my career, I would have never have been there. You know, I would have taken a safer job. I would have thought I would never earn a career. I would have thought, you know, etc., etc. So really go after what you believe in, because you are stronger than what you think. So that's one of the big philosophy. Then, of course, every country has a lot of learning. I think what's interesting right now in climate change is to see that potentially these countries, or surely these countries, are going to suffer, where I worked, stronger than what really the West has done to them. So I think one of the philosophy is just really, like, be respectful, be inclusive, be open-minded, understand the consequences, don't be entitled. I think that's a very important one. So being an expat in general, as an expat, we were like, being a foreigner in another country that is so different than yours, probably learning how to understand people and respect the others, and learn how to really understand them, and yeah, and maybe empathize is probably one of the biggest learning as well. I think I'm so happy I did it and so young, because I'm much more open-minded I could have ever been if I was only in France. And sometimes you do resist, like, it does take you, I always take this funny example, but like, I always take very personal example. It took me 3 years of my 4 5 years in India to understand arranged marriage. And that was such because I had my so strong, like, Occidental view on it. And when I finally understood, I was like, oh my God, it makes a lot of sense when you look at it from this part. So, like, really Jenny wanting to understand the other, its problem, empathizes, is probably one of the biggest kind of learning of philosophy from being somewhere else, you know. It's hard. I mean, there's so many philosophy amazing in each of these countries. I mean, I love all of them for different reasons. But that's kind of, as a human being, that's how I grew.
That's so inspiring, Cecile. And you're right. I mean, in the cultural context of different countries, especially when you have been to all these very, very different continents,
Very
uh,
different.
and it has values and cultures which are so deep down and running so deep that is difficult to process and comprehend. But to understand and be open-minded, as you said, it can take you years to really understand someone else's point of view. But till the time you can still understand it, it's great because you are going through your own learning journey around it. With that,
And understand you don't understand. I remember that I was in India, and every 2 years I was like, oh, I understood everything. And 2 years after, I was like, oh, now I understood it. Every 2 years, you're like this. Sorry.
with that, I would come to my last question, which is a couple of months ago, you cycled the entire coast of Britannia in France. How do you maintain the spirit of adventure while performing a crucial role in the job you clearly love? And how do you distinguish between the two? I mean, what is self-care? What is well-being? What is work-life balance for you, Cecile, largely?
I'm so excited you asked, because this is one of the things I'm the proudest at Sistema.bio. Actually, being the head of like HR people culture is so exciting because you get to craft stuff and to put a real intention. And that was our intention, because it's not only me, the executive team is the same way. And we care a lot about work-life balance and being real human beings. And so this is something that comes out always strongly in our employee pulse. Like, people are like, I really value this, thank you, this is super important to me, etc. So I think people nowadays that think that can work 24/7 and be productive are crazy people. I do think so. And so I really think you're at your best when you rest, when you get inspired, when you meet other people from completely other sector. I learned from completely other sector. When you read, when you recharge, when you spend time with your family, and when you're genuinely happy, you know? So, I mean, for me personally, when people tell me, I get a few people that tell me, oh, I'm a workaholic. I'm like, don't say this. This is not cool. I want you. And they said, no, 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 but I love my job. I'm like, thank you. I love my job too, but love your personal life as well. Like, it is so important. You need to love your personal life. There's so much in the world that are exciting, and please don't just don't work, you know? So that's super, I think, super, super important. And I think as well, and to touch on what you said, the spirit of adventure is very important as well. And that's something close to my heart. So I address this as well, because in times of climate change, one of the things that really bugs me is the number of plane people are taking because they want to have an adventure. And I think so it was not the first time I cycled for 2-3 weeks. I actually cycled Scotland, Ireland, part of south of Germany, and a bit of Argentina as well. And I think what I've learned from there is, like, you don't need to go far. You don't. Like, people like, oh my God, climate change, and they're so attached to their planes. But I mean, I was in Brittany, which is the northwest of France, and I had the best adventure, which, by the way, I had as well. I was stuck there during the pandemic, and people were seeing my pictures and they were like, oh my God, this is so cool. Where is that? I'm like, literally an hour around my house, because it's where we could go, right? And an adventure is there. Like, just leave your house, be open-minded, talk to people. You don't need to go. And like you said, I've lived in so many countries. I think I'm one of the most traveled people around me. I know, no, I'm part of a few, and I'm so lucky that I took planes when it was still cool. But really what I've learned is, like, every country is magnificent, but there's so much to explore. And so you don't need to go that far. And rediscovering adventure is just like, explore what's around you, have an adventure with friends, challenge yourself. Like, I was cycling 100K every day. I met so many old, young people, other travelers, not, and it was an amazing adventure. I didn't know where I was sleeping every night. Adventure is around you. So climate change is going to be okay, because it's just a state of mind. So you can do this too, you know? It's really important to me, because I see people speaking about planes, and they want to take even more planes before it's not okay. And I'm like, you don't need this. Yeah. And sorry, it's really important to me.
I completely hear you. And I like what you said in terms of, you don't need to go further away. I think somehow somehow this society has embedded this idea that adventure means distance, adventure means going to another country, adventure means further away. And we all are living in our own bubble where we don't see things happening around us everywhere in the world. I guess that's
everywhere.
Well, Cecile, I think this has been a very, very inspiring chat for us today. Thank you so much for bringing so much energy and passion. The only thing I would say is that I think we should start a community of women in climate, or like people in climate. People in climate is something we are anyways doing. I started thinking from a lens of when you talked about cultural dynamics and women, that probably makes sense to also inspire a lot more women to see your journey and see how you can be independent, how you can live around the world, how you can make a difference, and how you can still balance your life. So with that, Cecile, thank you so much for joining us today. We are very, very honored to have you with us. And I hope we'll have this adventure again very soon.
Again. Thank you. And all the best as well for Climate Asia, Satyam. It's really inspiring, and really, I love that you have as well. Part of it is connecting people, the job board. I think it's so necessary. People ask me all the time, where are jobs? Where are other people? So thank you for doing this. I think it's so needed.
Thank you, Cecile. Thank you so much.